QuickBooks Pro Desktop 2021. Memorized transactions, adjusting journal entries like depreciation and prepaid insurance. Let's get into it with Intuit. QuickBooks Pro Desktop 2021. Here we are in our Memorized Transactions Practice file. We currently have the open windows open. You can open the open windows by going to the View dropdown, selecting the Open Windows list. We've been taking a look at memorized transactions for items in the vendor cycle or the payable cycle, and then the customer cycle or receivable cycle or sales cycle. Now we want to take a look at adjusting entries using journal entries that can be then memorized. So let's assume that we purchased a piece of property, plant, and equipment, for example, and then we want to record the depreciation. We're going to record it in a straight line method. Therefore, we should have a standardized amount of depreciation that will be applied each time period. We're going to say each month. So let's put on a piece of equipment with a purchase. We're going to create the check here. We're going to purchase a piece of equipment. I'm going to say that it costs, let's say $10,000 or let's say $20,000 piece of equipment here. And we're going to say that this is going to go into equipment. Fixed assets, we'll call it furniture and equipment. And I'm going to say save and close on that one. I'm going to go to the reports up top. We're going to go to the company and financial. Let's take a look at that piece of equipment. Let's admire it on the balance sheet here. And there it is. There's the $20,000. So then we're going to depreciate that piece of equipment over, let's say, 5 years. Now we're going to use a straight line type of method. Notice that when you're thinking about depreciation, it can be a little bit confusing because you could have multiple pieces of equipment that are going to be depreciated at multiple different time ranges and whatnot. And you might be dependent then on, say, the tax preparer or accountant at the year end to tell you what the depreciation will be. And if you have some other depreciation method that's not going to simply be a straight line method, then it might be more complicated because the journal entry will change from period to period. So take those considerations in mind. Even if, however, if the adjusting entry will change from period to period, we could still memorize the transaction, remind us to do the transaction, and then make the adjustment. So other than, we may not be calculating, in other words, the depreciation each time. We might be getting the calculation of depreciation, say, from the CPA firm or the person who does the tax preparation, which will have access possibly to depreciation tables, both on a book and tax basis. I'm going to make one more adjustment to this. Let's assume we purchased this piece of equipment. I'm going to double click on it in January. So I'm going to make this purchase in January. So we have a full year here, and we'll think about it from the first point, 01/01/20, January 2020. So I'm going to say save and yes. And then let's close this out. Let's pull out the trusty calculator. The huge trusty calculator gets excited when you pull out the calculator. We're going to say this is going to be the 20,000, let's say 5-year property divided by 5. That would be 4,000 a year that we're going to depreciate. We're going to do it on a monthly basis. So let's divide that by 12 for a total of the 333.33 each month that we're going to depreciate. The other way you can think about that, by the way, is to say that it's 5 years times 12, 60 pay periods or 60 periods we're going to depreciate over. That would be 20,000 divided by those 60 periods, which will give you that same amount. The journal entry then will typically be done using a journal entry. Rather than, you could use the registers, but I'm going to use a journal entry. Company, we're going to say make journal entry. And I'm going to make the first one as of the end of the first month, which would be 01/31/20. And we're going to say that this is going to be debiting depreciation expense for the 333.33. And this is going to be an adjusting entry. And then the other side is going to be accumulated depreciation. Or let's see if we have something here. I'm going to hit the drop down. Should be in the fixed asset area. Accumulated depreciation. That's the one I want. That's a credit. And I'm also going to call this an adjusting entry. Adjusting entry. All right, then I'd like to memorize this transaction and repeat it each month. So I'm going to go to the Edit drop-down. We're going to memorize the journal entry. Memorize the journal entry. We have our options that we've seen in the past. We can add to the reminder list the journal entry. And this might be useful, and I'm going to call this the Depreciation Adj Entry. This might be useful, this first option, if we think that depreciation will change each month, like we're using something other than straight lines, such as double declining balance, or we're going to get the information possibly from the tax preparer each month. If not, if it's going to be exactly the same, in other words, we might just simply automatically record the transaction, and then it'll record it the same each month. So let's see what it'll look like. I'm going to keep it there and say we need to do this monthly. So I want to say it's going to happen monthly. And then the next time it's going to happen is at the end of February, 02/28/20. 02/28/20 is the next time we want that to happen. Are there 29? There's 29 days in 2020. So 02/29 we'll say. And then I'm going to say OK, and it takes a picture of that. If I say save and close, QuickBooks, I'm not going to do the fixed stat, so we'll track that. So there we have it. So now the book value, we put it on the books at 20,000, and then we record the depreciation for 1 month that has now passed, which is that, and that gives us the book value of the 19,666. On the profit and loss side, if I go to the reports drop down, company and financial profit and loss side of things, we then have the depreciation. If I record this from 01/01/20 to 12/31/20, there is our depreciation. If we go into the memorized transactions, the reminders, I should say, reminders, we then see we have a reminder here, to record the depreciation for 2/29, which has passed now. If I go to the lists drop down and we go to the memorized transactions, we will also see that here. It's very past due, so we have to do it. I'm going to close this up. You can also get there by going from here to double clicking on that transactions. Takes you to your list. Double click the list and say OK. It then makes the transaction for you. QuickBooks assigns journal entries, that's fine. And then it's done for you. So I'm going to record it as of 2/29. I'm going to say save and close, and let's see what happens. I'm going to say OK, OK, and then I'm going to close this out. And there it is. Now it's at 666.66, and there's the two transactions on the detail report balance sheet. We now have this amount on the balance sheet, and the difference between the two is the 19,333. We do it again. We go hit the drop down or the reminder, and we're going to say that we still have another reminder on 3/31. Double click on it, and then I'm going to say we got to record that. So I'm going to double click on it. Records the transaction at the end of March. Same transaction, looks exactly the same. I'm going to say save and close, and say yes and OK, and then close this back out and close this back out. Then now it's at the 999. 999 minus the 20,000 leaves us with the 19,000. Profit and loss side, we see the other side, depreciation 999. Three transactions have now taken place, 3 journal entries at the end of the 3 months. Let's do one more. We're going to go to the reminder. Once again, we're going to see it here, double clicking on it. Going to take us here. I'm going to say 430, double click on that. We need to make that transaction, and say we had to adjust it now. If you're getting this information possibly from a tax preparer, you could say, look, this reminded me to do it, but now the method, if I'm using something other than straight line, is different. So then you can adjust whatever the new amount would be, and you can use this to remind you to do the adjusting entry, or remind you to ask the accountant to give you what the current month depreciation should be according to the software that they might have to provide it. And then you can change this and still use the memorized transactions to remind you about it. And so you can do that, and then close this back out, and there's our depreciation. So we changed it for this month, but we used the memorized transaction to remind us to do so. So let's think about another one. What about like prepaid insurance is another one that's common in this area. So let's say we had to pay for like a year's worth of insurance, and we typically will put that into a prepayment, and then we'll expense it over the term of the insurance. So let's say, for example, I paid for the insurance. So then I'm going to call it liability insurance company that we're going to pay this time. New vendor. I'm going to set it up for $12,000 that we're going to pay for an entire year starting on 4/30. So on 4/30, we're going to pay for a policy that's going to extend a year, which costs $12,000. And then we're going to say we're not going to hit the expense account this time, but rather we're going to hit a insurance prepayment account. So insurance prepayment. So I'm going to say tab, and I'm going to say set up, It's going to be an other current asset type of account. So other current asset type of account and continue. And there it is. That looks good. I'm going to say save and close. And then we'll save and close. And yes. And I think that's good. So we'll go to the balance sheet now. And we're going to update the balance sheet. And on the balance sheet, we then have the prepaid insurance on the books at that $12,000. Now we already paid for it now. But now as time passes, we typically will expense the portion that has passed or expired, typically on a monthly basis. It's a 12-month policy, so we're going to expense $1,000 each month as it passes. This will be a standardized transaction that we can make basically at the end of each month, therefore memorizing it. So it's going to be another kind of journal entries, the typical way to do this. Company drop down, we're going to say that we want to make a journal entry. And then I'm going to say that this happens at the end, I think, at 5. So let's say 05/31/20. We're going to say we have liability insurance is the debit. I'm going to set that up as an expense account. That's going to be the debit that we're going to expense. And we're going to say it's going to be $12,000 divided by 12 months because 1 month has expired, or $1,000. This is going to be an adjusting entry, and the other side is going to go to prepaid insurance, or insurance prepayment. That's what I called it. It's an other current asset, so decreasing the other current asset. This is going to be an adjusting entry. So this will then decrease the asset and increase the expense. I also want to memorize this now, so I'm going to go to the edit drop down. We want to say we would like to memorize the journal entry. And this time I'm just going to say, just do it. I don't need you to remind me. Just do it, because I know it has to be done each month. I don't even need to check it, and it'll still give me that pop-up when I open up the file. So I'm going to say, all right, let's do it on a monthly basis. The next one needs to be done, we're going to say, on 06/30/20. And then we'll leave that and leave that. I'm going to say okay. And the name can't be blank, so this is going to be, let's say, Prepaid Insurance, and then OK. And then we'll say save and close, save and close. And I'm going to say yes here. Okay, so there we have it. So now we have this recorded transaction, so now it went down by $1,000 because we recorded it, right? So we've got the $12,000 that we paid. A month has now passed. We did the adjusted entry, decreasing it. So now we have 11 months remaining at $1,000, which would be the $11,000 that are still in the prepayment. If I then go to the profit and loss, then we have $1,000 recorded on the profit and loss for the liability insurance. We had the insurance up above, but we're looking at the liability insurance here. And so I'm going to close this. And then if we go to the reminders up top, it's not going to be in the reminders because we told it just to do it. You just do it. So it's not in the memorized transaction. So if I close the company up and then open it back up, if the time has passed, which it has, then it should give me a little thing that says, hey, we're going to record this, and just hit the blue button and then we'll do it. So I'm going to close the company and then open it back up and see if that is indeed the case. So the company's closed. Now I'm going to open it back up and see if we get that pop-up asking us to just complete the transaction that we had told it to do on a monthly basis, and the month has now passed, and so now it's going to say that we're going to do this. Now notice it's basically saying, hey, look, there's a bunch of months that have passed already. Do you want us to automatically record the transactions, because I backdated this for all of them. So now it's going to record all the transactions basically at the end of the time period. And that looks good. So I'm going to say, yeah, do that. That's good. And then yes. And so I'm going to say, okay. And then I'm going to go to the view drop down and look at the open windows again. And if we go to the balance sheet now, it recorded all the months that have now passed. So if we look at the prepaid insurance at this point in time, insurance prepayment, and I double click on that, then we have our 12,000, and then these are all the months that have now passed. So it recorded 1,000 with this reoccurring journal entry at the end of each month. Looks beautiful. We're going to close that back out. Look at the other side, which is going to be on the profit and loss, which I expect to be equally amazing. And we're going to go back on over here, and it's the liability insurance, 5,000 total. If we double click on it, there's all the adjusting journal entries that have been done automatically.